Alright, all you glorious gamers out there, welcome to the PlayersToo Podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find PlayersToo on all the social media, that's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com, that's PLAYERSTOO.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, it really, really helps us out. And while you're over there as well, if you could leave us a little review, that just helps us out all the more. I know I say this every single week, it does not become less important on a weekly basis, and thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. It really, really does help us out, and it really does mean a lot that you've taken that time to go and do it. So thank you. Alright, and on with the show. My name is Mark Henderson. With me, as always, Mr. Lewis Camley. How's it going, Lewis?
Very well, Mark. I have finally had a bit of a rest and a few days off work. So
excellent.
My energy levels of the past few weeks finally back to normal, or something approaching normal. Not quite there yet. Not had quite enough days off, but yeah, I got a little bit more zip in my step.
Oh, well, that's good, man. That is good. Not that well. I'm still working very, very hard. But Lewis, we're going to ignore all of that. That's in a different world today. What have you been playing this week with all your glorious time off?
Well, not as much as I thought I might have got to be totally honest. I have still been plugging away at Ghost of Tsushima, which I think I'm pretty much approaching the end game now. I'm effectively about to start the third section of the island. I keep saying the third island, but they're not.
I know, it's one island. I also refer to them all as islands, but I think that might be a GTA hangover.
Possibly, yeah. They're just separate sections. So I'm just about to start that third bit, I think. And I remember you saying that it's a shorter section, or it felt like a shorter section. I
felt that the third section of the island was shorter, yes. Maybe about 25% of the game is maybe in the third section.
So still a reasonable
I mean, yeah, it's
chunk,
not an insignificant amount, and you will definitely spend a good amount of time in the third section. I just didn't feel as if there was quite as many like main missions, if you want to put it that way. And obviously you're tying up a lot of sort of loose ends in the side mission content and things like that. To me, it just felt as if it went a lot faster. I don't really know if that's true or if I just absolutely caned that bit for whatever reason. But yeah, I definitely felt as though the third section of the island was a bit less than the first two anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm ready for it to be coming to an end now, not because I'm not enjoying it, I still really am. It just totally is what it is as a game, and there's a certain point, I think, particularly halfway through this second section, where I've kind of just gone, this is what this is. It's got some flaws. I mean, I've found some bugs. We were texting a little bit back and forward about a couple of bugs that I've run into and that you have as well.
Yeah, I've run into a few,
I think there's some repetition in the mission structure and in general in the narrative and that kind of thing, which I won't go into because I don't want to spoil anything for anyone. I've been really impressed by the ways that the game does evolve in the second section, though, because I think they could have got away with making that game kind of just the same game from start to finish with a slight difficulty increase in each section, but there is quite a lot of small and subtle changes just to how what sort of missions are available to you in the second section and how certain character relationships develop and that kind of thing, which I've been finding really impressive.
Yeah, I think that's what it is for me anyway. And although you could argue about repetitiveness perhaps in the missions themselves or in the combat or whatever, but I think really in the relationship to other characters, like you do see them evolve as you continue to play the game, which is really nice. And sometimes in video games that isn't always very clear, or your relationship to certain characters can be quite stagnant. But you do see all these relationships evolve as you continue to play the game, which is nice, and it's well written, I would say.
Definitely, yeah. It's got a lot of positives going for it, basically. The one other thing that I've been playing, which I mentioned that I had started last week and that I rolled credits on just a couple of days ago, is Carrion.
Nice one, man.
Which, yeah, is this brilliant little game that I played on Xbox Game Pass. It feels like the perfect Game Pass game. It's only, 5 or 6 hours long, maybe. There's a few extra things because it's a Metroidvania that I could have gone back and, extra abilities and stuff to find, basically. But I looked into it a little bit and it didn't seem like there was any real reason to do that. It wasn't going to add very much to the experience having rolled credits. That's the thing that I really like about modern indie gaming, is that Metroidvanias in particular, they've taken that formula and they've boiled it down quite a lot to just much shorter experiences like you find in Carrion, which just has like one idea and a couple of little spins off of that idea. So essentially this game is you play as a big tentacled monster. What kind of stuff would that monster get up to trying to escape a facility? And that's the whole game, and whereas original Metroid and some Metroidvanias can be much longer than that and can have a lot of stuff going on, and Hollow Knight seems to have
classic,
seems to have things going off in all directions and all sorts of extra stuff that you could do.
Yeah, it's a very intimidating map. Like if you've ever looked at the Hollow Knight map, it's quite intimidating to look at.
Totally.
Whereas I think a simple game like that, as you said, it really boils it down. It really distills it in a nice way to just be the simplest form of itself, which is really nice. Which is good.
And had a brilliant little ending for the game as well. So I was
really
that's
good
chuffed to hit that.
That's good. Glad you played it then.
Really glad. Yeah, I mean, it's not perfect by any stretch. It's loads of fun. I actually think that you were right last week when you said that there had been complaints from reviewers about the controls and the movement.
That was one of the major criticisms.
So as I was saying at that point, physically moving the creature around, I found actually loads of fun. It's quite different to a lot of different games. Like, it sort of fires off its tentacles everywhere and pulls itself along, a bit like you might expect to find in Spider-Man or something. That's a huge leap. Don't quote me on that. But there's something there that's great about it. But the more nuanced movements, the more deliberate motions that you're trying to make, i.e. when you're trying to grab a specific person or grab a specific switch with a tentacle, doesn't work very well. I suspect it would be better with mouse and keyboard, potentially. Honest, like, it just doesn't really work very well. So it's never a big problem because you're sort of just thrashing around the screen most of the time anyway when you're in combat situations. But yeah, that's like one letdown of it a bit. There's times when you're trying to be more specific, you know?
I might see myself getting around to it, possibly, maybe.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of hurdles I've deliberately put up for myself there. But I wouldn't be against playing it, certainly, as perhaps a play-along game at some point.
It would
like that,
absolutely be great for that, and you'd devour it very quickly, I think. So I'm sure you'd get a kick out of it. What have you been playing, though?
Well, I finished Uncharted 4, which, of the Uncharted series, remains, as far as I'm concerned, the unquestionable best game of that series.
Nice.
Really enjoyed the ending, actually. It had a really nice, neat ending in a lot of ways. And I'm kind of glad that they just wrapped up the story of Nathan Drake. Do you know what I mean? A lot of games don't do that, and it has to be sequel and sequel and sequel and sequel and sequel, and there just has to be the next one and the next one and the next one. And I would really like it, actually, if they went back and did another Uncharted game, they'd done something like Lost Legacy or whatever, and didn't reprise the role of Nathan Drake, you know? I would be totally fine with that, and I actually think that would be quite nice. Not that I think that we're getting another Uncharted anytime soon, in particular, to be completely honest. But if they did go back and make a game, I would hope that they wouldn't use Nathan Drake again, and maybe it would be his daughter, or maybe it would be, I don't know, like Chloe or whoever.
Yeah, just the
spin-off games. I wouldn't be against more of the series, particularly if it was more like 4. But I do genuinely hope that they don't do more with Nathan Drake, because I think that this could be an example that a lot of other series could follow.
Yeah.
E.g., just have it end.
Yeah, just know what your story is and
know
tell
what your
it
story
and
is,
end it,
tell it, end it. I actually think that's quite nice and very rare in video games, and I like that exists. I like that the series exists for that point, if nothing else. And I hope that his role is kind of done and dusted. At the end of the game, they do seem to have sort of moved on with their life. And again, I think that's good. That's good in the context of the story as well, and that's kind of all of what Nathan Drake was doing. Like, he was always getting caught up in these things, and he was not actually progressing with his life in any meaningful way.
Yeah, exactly.
And at the end of that, you really properly see that progression, and it does actually end quite well. I was like quite happy with the ending of the game. Yeah. But after that, I decided to start playing Life is Strange 2, which has been on the to playlist for a very, very long time. I'm not going to say too much about it because, one, I want to avoid spoilers, obviously. And two, I've actually not played all that much. Like, I've not even finished the first episode. I think that I'm right at the very, very end of the first episode, but I've not played a lot of it yet. But what I will say about this game is, in a world where everyone's trying to shut politics out of video games, this game wears its politics on its fucking sleeve, screaming to the world. I mean, this game is very much about two immigrant boys on the run in Trump's America. I mean, that is absolutely what it is. It makes direct references to The Wall, for example. The story has developed from places of... Again, I don't want to get into this too much. I don't want to spoil anything, but I mean, there's elements of systemic racism, or direct racism in some cases, and police brutality comes up as well, all of which are very current topics that are happening like right now. Yeah. And this game came out, a couple of years ago, so it kind of preceded the current wave of the BLM movement and whatever, but it's very, very, very relevant right now, and it's really, really interesting that it's being that direct about it in a way that you don't see a lot of video games do, and I'm really interested to see where they go with that, to be honest.
Is Trump actually named at any point?
No.
I wondered if they would be as direct as that. And tell me about the relationship to the gameplay of Life is Strange 1. Does it feel like it's the same series?
Yeah, it does. I mean, in terms of its aesthetic as well, it looks like Life is Strange, you know what I mean? It has a very sort of simple 3D art style, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean? It's not going for high fidelity or anything like that. Yeah, I would say that it does feel a lot like the first Life is Strange. I also played Captain Spirit as well before it, just to get in the mood, I suppose. It's the same, like, kind of really good score and stuff like that across it. Has a lot of sort of teenage angst
Yeah.
going around as well. Ultimately, a lot of like strong relationships, which are really what the game is about. And I would say that it does feel like Life is Strange. Maybe more like Before the Storm than actual Life is Strange 1. But yeah, I mean, it definitely feels like a Life is Strange game. Great. Yeah, definitely. And I'm really looking forward to playing more of it, actually. I kind of had to force myself to start playing it for some reason. I wasn't really geared up to play it. And then I played Captain Spirit first, and then I played most of the first episode. And after that, I'm just like, God, I want to know what happens next in this story, which is really interesting because that's what an episode of game should do, isn't it? You know, exactly. I mean, I should be at the end of the first episode and wanting to find out what happens more. Fortunately, I'm in the position where I get to binge it all at once, but it's good that they've built their story that way as well. Do you know what I mean? Particularly being episodic. So yeah, I'll report on that more as I continue to play.
Nice.
But for now, it's time for the news. All right, news item number 1 list, and it's a big one. The Xbox Series S has leaked and subsequently been confirmed by Xbox. For those of you keeping up with the lingo, this is Project Lockhart. This is the little brother to the Series X. So the S will feature the following. It will have 1440p and up to 200 frames per second, DirectX ray tracing, variable rate shading, variable refresh rate, ultra low latency, 512GB solid state drive, 4K streaming media playback, 4K upscaling for games, which is very good, and it will be all digital. And from a previous leak, we know or very strongly suspect that we will be getting a 4 teraflop GPU as well. But Lewis, the most exciting thing about this announcement is almost certainly the astonishingly low price. So it has been confirmed by Xbox that the price will be $299 or £249 here in the UK, which is extremely low for a next-gen console. And it has also been confirmed that the release date will be November the 10th. And unless something crazy is being planned at Xbox, this will also be the release date for the Series X as well. So we've got a release date, we've got a price of at least one of them, but the leak also suggested that the Series X price would be $499, and at this point, who are we to doubt this leak, to be honest? It's all been confirmed. So it very much looks as though the X will be $499 and the S will be $299, so a hell of a lot cheaper. Hell of a lot cheaper. So, before we get into any of that, Lewis, why do you think it looks like a Bluetooth speaker?
I actually really like how it looks.
Really?
Yeah,
I am astonished.
I'm not sure
that black circle in it offends me greatly.
Oh, I like that.
Oh, God.
I think it's got like an element of style about it. It definitely won't be for everyone, but I think the form factor has an element of stylishness, an element of kind of modern design principles, which I think works really nicely.
It's a keyboard.
It's a white keyboard, it's a keyboard, but it like references its bigger brother by. I mean, the circle is the same as the circle.
Yes,
on top
I understand
of the X.
that. Yes.
So I just think, and the contrast of the white and the black works really nicely. It's a very small box. I mean, when you see it,
it is a very small box.
It looks like you could fit almost 3 of them inside the X when you show you the little graphic in the trailer.
Yeah.
And when it shows you it next to the controller, I mean, the controller is about half the height of this thing. So.
Yeah, no, it does. It definitely looks very small, and they are marketing it as the smallest Xbox ever as well.
And they've had some meaty boys before.
I mean, it wouldn't be a hard thing to hit, to be honest with you. They have had some meaty consoles, I've got to say. Although having said that, the PS3 fat, God almighty.
Yeah, pretty fat. But yeah, I think it looks nice. I know it won't be for everyone, but I think, we were unsure at first about the PS5 look, and, both of us, I think, quite quickly got into that. I think this works really nicely. It definitely won't be for everyone.
I must admit, I was a bit sceptical about the Xbox Series X's look when it first came out, when it was just a big black cuboid. It just sort of looked a bit monolithic, and it was just a bit uninteresting, but I've sort of came round on it, actually. Yeah. Do you know what it is? I think I just wanted the wee cube. I just wanted the wee white cube. You know, the kind of mocked up art that you've seen about the place where it just looked like half of the X. I just wanted that, and it just didn't come as that, and I was a wee bit disappointed, and then it had a big black circle in it, and I was like, why is that there? Anyway, on to the important stuff, Liz. On to the important stuff. This price point is incredible. Absolutely incredible. This will almost certainly undercut the PlayStation's cheapest console by at least £100, I'm willing to bet, but more likely £150.
Potentially as much as 200.
And potentially as much as 200. I would say that would be a colossal mistake by PlayStation. But I mean, it's in that realm. It's, we will say, between £100 and £200 cheaper than the cheapest PlayStation. I would be willing to bet at this point. We do not obviously know that, although Game Guildford has weirdly leaked that we might be getting a PlayStation announcement tomorrow as we record this, so you might very well know this information by the time you hear this podcast, ladies and gentlemen. But as we sit here just now, it very much looks like this will be the cheapest next-gen console by a mile.
And cheaper than the Nintendo Switch is even, which I think is a remarkable thing to think that you can access next-gen gameplay. And they are absolutely, I mean, you listeners and me myself might not have understood everything of the specs that you read out there. I mean, who does know everything there is to know about flops? But other than the boffins at Digital Foundry. But this is a next-gen box. This is what they're saying, that if you see the trailer that they've released, they play up the idea that it's next-gen performance, next-gen gameplay, everything that you're expecting the Series X to be able to do, this can do, you know, in a smaller way, probably, in a not quite as powerful way. It wouldn't be
quite as impressive graphically, you wouldn't have thought. Yeah. However, this console, so far as we are aware, will play every game that you can play on a Series X.
Yeah. So as far as we know, like you say, that
as far as we know,
some of those details are still to be cleared up. But from everything else that Xbox has been saying up till this point, there's not really any reason to think otherwise. And it would be, I mean, we were certainly talking about this as the announcement was happening earlier, the idea that you could have Series X only games that aren't on Series S, I think would piss off a hell of a lot of people.
Oh yeah, I don't think that would be good at all, because I think that just due to the price point of this console is going to sell incredibly well. I really, really believe that, to the point that I think that this console could really change the tide of the next gen in terms of hardware sales for Xbox. I still think that a high-end console, in terms of the high-end consoles, e.g. so the PS5 and the X, I still think that the PlayStation 5 will probably quite significantly outsell the Xbox here and now today, not knowing the price of the PlayStation 5. However, that cheap box is so cheap that as a Game Pass machine, we have both talked about the fact we're probably get one.
Yeah.
And is making my Xbox One X purchase from not a couple of weeks ago feel a bit crap, to be honest now. Because I was not expecting it to be anywhere near that cheap. That is astoundingly cheap.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely the limits of what anyone was expecting, yeah.
Another point of this, though, is the fact that it's quite a significant cut in hardware specs from the X to the S. There's no denying this. I have kind of read things here and there, or speculation here and there, that a lot of the Microsoft machine learning, and maybe there might be support from the xCloud project that helps you to play these games at a better quality on that machine than that local hardware is actually capable of doing, which is really, really, really interesting in and of itself. But nonetheless, it's going to be a significant step down from the PlayStation 5 and the X, meaning that we run into this problem again. We've just discussed a couple of weeks ago about the problems that 343 have creating a next-gen game that feels like a next-gen game on the X while still playing on the Xbox One. And although it's not that big a drop, obviously the S will perform significantly better than any of the Xbox One consoles, I firmly believe anyway. It still raises this question: death by a lowest common denominator, and the lowest common denominator now is the Xbox Series S. So all third-party games, presuming that Xbox will force them to be playable on the S and the X, which they absolutely should do for their own customers. They should totally insist on that. And the PlayStation 5 and PC. Does that mean that you are then limited in what you can do? And even for Xbox's own games, you know what I mean, Halos of the future, Gears of Wars of the future, Fable, what does that mean for them? Do they have to stick to the strict spec of the S and not take the X to its full capacity? Because that seems to be the difference here, is that PlayStation aren't even entertaining a next-gen console at that price point, because they want their games to take advantage of this all singing, all dancing hardware that they're about to sell us. Whereas Xbox seem to be just trying to get Xbox and Games Pass into literally as many people as they possibly can. But do you then compromise the games in doing that?
Well, Xbox are saying that that isn't necessary. They've been saying this all along, that this...
But 343 and their own statements have proved, at least cross-generationally, that was not true.
Or at least that it's a bigger issue than they led us to believe at
and
first.
Yes, I obviously understand that the jump from the S to the X will not be as big as the 1 to the X, obviously. I mean, Jesus. But still.
I think we're talking, in these terms, between the S and the X, we're really talking about graphical differences by and large, and maybe load time differences and that kind kind of thing. But I think we're talking about small differences in the grand scheme of things. Not that they won't be noticeable, and particularly if those things are things that are important to you as a gamer, I'm sure you absolutely will notice the difference there. I think for a lot of people, the trade-off between those two things won't be so great. And I think you've got to just assume that Xbox aren't going into this blind, that they understand the development landscape and what doing this will mean for games. You know, they would have, surely...
Oh, of course. I'm not denying that, but I'm just thinking of Halo Infinite 3.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is that still having to run on the S? Do you know what I mean?
I think
like,
it will,
still really have to be beholden to what, by that point, I'm sure will look like a pretty old piece of hardware?
Yeah. I mean,
and does that just get cut at some point? You know what I mean? That's what I would fear if I bought one.
I don't think that the X and the S will ever be playing different games. I think that the support for the Xbox One will drop after a year or two. And they kind of said that in the beginning, that there wouldn't be any generational exclusives for a year or two after the launch of the new consoles. So
although that has been backtracked a bit as well.
Well, backtracked a bit, or certainly very muddied over the last couple of months, definitely. So yeah, who knows with any certainty about any of that stuff. But I can see basically one of two things. I think, one, yes, the games are held back. So Halo Infinite 3, not that I think that there will be that anyway, but...
No, you understand.
Yeah. But so Gears 7, say, will be kind of... I'm reluctant to use the word held back, but will have to be playable still on the weaker console. But I also think that we might just be looking at a model from Xbox now, which is much closer to the mobile phone market, where in a couple of years' time, they'll just be saying, you need to upgrade now if you want the new thing. Everything about what they're doing, the financing model, the subscriptions, even the naming, like the naming keeps it all within one thing, but there's different SKUs of the series.
Let's not go down the naming, Jesus Christ.
But there's something in all of that which I think you could imagine them having an equivalent like Apple event in a couple of years' time, where they go, here's the
new Series S.
Yeah, the Series S 0.5 or the Series X 0.5, or, you know, not that I think they would actually call it that, but it's just like this is the Series X 2023. You know, so maybe that's how they'll get over that barrier, because they're going to want still a 7 or 8 year console generation, if not much longer. Really, they're talking about generations kind of being over as a concept, so they're going to want a long lifetime on this, and the hardware will surpass it in that time if they don't do something. So
yeah, it's very, very interesting. I'm genuinely interested to see what comes of this. I'm genuinely interested to see what PlayStation's response to this is going to be more than anything as well, and when we get those prices, what this looks like, because I really think that is going to determine quite a lot of what this situation is. Because if PlayStation come out and they slap a $600 price tag on their PlayStation 5 with a disc, I think that is a colossal mistake, knowing now what Xbox are looking like, you know. And if they were planning on doing that, I really think they have to think again.
Yeah.
Alright, news item number 2. Nintendo has had a Super Mario Bros. 35th anniversary direct this week, Lewis. We did speak about this last week a little bit, or the fact that we thought that some of these games might be getting delayed. But let's see. There were lots of announcements. Firstly, they announced a limited edition Game & Watch that played the OG Mario Brothers and the Lost levels, which was just nice. It was just like a cool little collector's thing. That'll be out on November the 13th. But then, first big confirmation, Lewis, Super Mario 3D World is coming to the Switch, along with what looks like additional DLC called Bowser's Revenge, and that will be coming on February 2021. So it looks like the gentleman from last week, Mr. The Hate, if you will remember correctly, was correct about this, and this has actually been pushed out from the year which I'm sure they wanted to release it, which would have been in line with Mario's 35th birthday. But nonetheless, the game is coming to the Switch, which is only good. Then after that list, they announced a Super Mario Brothers Battle Royale, where you played OG Super Mario Brothers against 35 other people, and this was a fantastic idea. An absolutely fantastic idea. I love this in concept. It's also available right now on your Nintendo Switch Online membership as well, which is great. However, you only have until the 31st of March 2021 to play it, and put a pin in that. We'll come back to that later on. After that was Mario Kart Live Home Circle. This was a Mario Kart AR game where you had a little toy with a camera in it that you just drove around your living room, say, and it created a track for you to play on your Switch. It, again, was an absolutely fantastic idea. I feel that this and the Battle Royale idea were insanely good, and I will never touch either of them. But they are just fantastic and genuinely a good use of AR as well.
Oh, yeah.
you don't really see a lot. I mean, a lot is spoken about AR, and then I feel that the implementations of AR is usually pretty poor. But I actually thought that was a great idea, like really, really, really good. And that's coming on October the 16th. Then after that, they had a whole bunch of 30th anniversary stuff, including merch and some in-game events happening in Mario Maker and Smash and Splatoon. But we're going to breeze right past that to get into Super Mario All-Stars. This is the 2D Marios, the OG Mario Bros, Mario Bros 2, Mario Bros 3, and Mario Bros The Lost Levels, all with upgraded sound and visuals from the original games. And by all accounts, this is probably the best way to play these games really today. And all of this is now available on the SNES collection on your Nintendo Online right now, which is super awesome as well. I might have to go back to them. I kind of dabble in 2D Marios quite a lot. I actually prefer 2D Marios to 3D Marios, I would say, which I know is sacrilege to you, but there you go. But speaking of 3D Marios, Liz, Super Mario Bros. 3D All-Stars has been announced. This is the confirmation that Mario 64, Mario Sunshine, and Mario Galaxy will be coming to the Switch. Huzzah! And the internet went wild.
Certainly did, eh?
However, unlike what the leaks promised, despite the fact that these games are at a higher resolution and are at 16:9 screen ratio, these are not remakes. No one will convince me these are remakes. These are ports.
Yeah.
These are ports of the old games to the Switch, which to me genuinely was a little bit disappointing. Like, it really was. I was expecting these games to look like Mario Odyssey, but be Mario 64, you know. This also means specifically for Galaxy that it will still rely heavily on the Wii motion controls. Like, none of the controls have been updated. The controls just now work with the Joy-Cons rather than the Wiimote. But also means that if you have the Switch Lite, you have to have additional Joy-Cons, and you have to have a stand for it as well, because you can't use the analog sticks on the Lite itself, which is just a bit crap. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just not great. Having said that, Nintendo are planning on charging you full price for all these 3 games, which do luckily come in a collection. And everyone did it, including me and Liz. We all bought a copy. We all pre-ordered the copy. The game launches on September the 18th, but will only be available to purchase online and physically until March the 31st. That means that you can buy a copy between now, or pre-order a copy anyway, now until the 31st of March 2021. You will still be able to play those games into eternity, as far as we are aware, but you will not be able to buy them beyond March the 31st. And this is manufactured scarcity and is absolute fucking dog shit. However, we have both pre-ordered the game.
Yeah.
And it's now the second highest selling game on Amazon in 2020. And the game isn't actually out yet.
Yeah.
So it totally fucking worked. And that annoys the hell out of me.
If we're starting there, then yes, like, this is a very problematic approach from Nintendo that has worked, because it kind of always works. Manufactured scarcity, something that Disney in particular is well known for doing over the years, although I think even they're moving beyond it now with like Disney Plus.
But it's not even that, it's like limited edition shoes and whatever that come out and people go wild for them, and there's like, oh, there's only 200 in the world, but the reason that there's only 200 in the world is because they only made 200.
Exactly, yeah.
And they decided to sell those 200 for an extortionate amount of money rather than sell lots of them for a reasonable amount of money.
Yeah. And so the physical scarcity is one side, because we do see that some games only get limited physical releases.
But this is
not normally Mario games, though. Yeah.
This is a limited digital release.
Yeah.
I've never heard of such a thing.
I don't think I've heard of it either. I don't like it. It has created this scenario where a lot of people who may have... I mean, I was always intending to buy this. There's no doubt to me that I would have bought it anyway, but I might not have pre-ordered it because I basically never pre-order anything.
I have never, ever in my life pre-ordered the game on the day that it was announced until this game.
Yeah, because it gave you the impression, particularly for us, we both wanted physical copies.
Yeah.
For various reasons. So for us, it felt like you absolutely had to be there on that day and ordering it. Now, I don't know if they've actually sold out or not. I have no idea.
I don't think so. I don't think that they have. Like, I think that you will be able to get a copy relatively easily until the 31st of March. But it made me want to just pre-order it.
Yeah,
it made me just want to lock that down and not have to worry about it.
Yeah, I totally agree. So,
and I just didn't like that. And the fact that they were like ports and not remakes as well, it just sort of tainted this announcement a wee bit that I was really looking forward to, you know? And it was just a wee bit, it didn't feel great. Like, the 2D Mario All-Stars coming as well, super great. That Battle Royale, great, although again, that's only available until the 31st of March. The Mario Kart Live, great. Like, these were all really good announcements, and I feel it's just been marred a little by that, you know? And I don't know if that's maybe I'm just being like totally sensitive to this, but I really didn't like that.
Yeah.
And I felt as if I pre-ordered that because my hand was forced not because I wanted to pre-order it.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. Certainly in your case, and in part in my case. I agree. I've been trying to be really positive about this because, like you said, I wanted remasters. The leaks suggested remasters. I'm a little disappointed that they're not. I'm not that gutted about it because getting to play these games in their original state is kind of fine as long as there's some quality of life improvements. There won't be anything to the games themselves, I don't suppose, but the slight changes to resolution, the changes to aspect ratio and that kind of thing. I do worry that some of the controls might be a bit messed up, a bit problematic, but we'll see. Basically, in my head, I'm like, getting these 3 games is a bit of a dream for me on the Switch because since playing Mario Odyssey, I've been desperate to dive into this back catalogue that we just missed out on, having not been Nintendo gamers as kids, really. Yeah. So to me, that part of it is amazing. I think actually a lot of the really positive stuff about this whole direct has kind of been lost in the mix because, like you say, the
which is so disappointing because it was a really great direct after a lot of lackluster ones.
And after a lot of silence, even they finally hit it out the park with a bunch of different, and like you say, some really fascinating ideas. I'm exactly the same with this. AR Mario Kart isn't something that I'm going to play. I'm not going to be racing toy cars around my living room. But if I was like 9 and had that, it would be
the coolest thing in the world.
Unbelievable. It looks really well done if that is a representative of the actual gameplay. So I'm trying to be positive about what they've announced and said here, but I really hope this is a one-off in terms of the digital scarcity. If this is a COVID thing, if this is a Nintendo is fucked for money and they are doing this to get some money in the account before the end of the financial year or whatever, I don't like it. I'll live with that if it's a one-off. But if this becomes something that, if they did this with the Skyward Sword remake that was being talked about, I don't want to see that happen with any of that stuff. It should absolutely be a one and done.
Yes, let's certainly hope that it is, Lewis. All right, Lewis. News item number 3. EA has enabled in-game ads in UFC 4, but almost immediately took them down because of an enormous amount of fan backlash. EA has said this in way of an apology/explanation.
Earlier this week, the team turned on ad placements in EA Sports UFC 4 that appeared during the replay moments in gameplay. This type of advertising inventory is not new to the UFC franchise, though we have typically reserved displaying ads to specific main menu tiles or octagon logo placement. It's abundantly clear from your feedback that integrating ads into the replay and overlay experience is not welcome. The advertisements have been disabled by the team, and we apologise for any disruption to gameplay that players may have experienced. We realise that this should have been communicated with players ahead of time, and that's on us. We want to make sure our players have the best possible experience playing EA Sports UFC 4, so ad integration in the replay and overlay experience will not be reappearing in the future. Thank you for your continued feedback on EA Sports UFC 4. They did manage to get the name of the game in several times into that short segment.
Yes, they did. Now, to explain what we are talking about here, between the replay section, ad for Amazon Prime's The Boys popped up in the middle of the game, which I cannot describe to you how much I hate that. However, we are talking here about a full price game. The game came out on August the 14th, meaning that this is well past its review period for this to then be introduced. But we also know that Warner Media and Experian had ads run in UFC 3 earlier this year, a game that is nearly 2 years old. So when they say that this is not new, it's not technically new, but nobody was playing that game at that time.
Yeah.
This was obviously a test case to see if they could get away with it in UFC 4, which they thought they could, and as it turns out, they can't. Also, it seems to me very underhanded, because this is obviously what they were planning for this game before the game even came out, and decided to wait till after its obvious review period, where there would have been obvious critic pushback to such utter disgusting tactics of advertising in-game. It's just sleazy. It's just, you know what it is, honestly? It's just become typical of EA.
Yeah.
It's just become what we associate EA with all the time. It's just underhand, shitty tactics to try and squeeze as much money out of their properties as physically fucking possible. Rather than decide to make a good game, what they've decided is to sell you an advertising platform now, or that is how they seem to be seeing it, apparently.
I mean, to an extent, I don't know if it's a good game or not. I haven't even seen reviews for it, I don't think, but
to be honest with you, it's not relevant.
It
doesn't matter.
Yeah, just to say that they're not necessarily selling you an advertising.
Honestly, I think that this is almost the most disgusting way to make money in game, because they have sold you a full price game for them to use as an advertising platform. You've already paid them quite a large amount of money in a game where there is also microtransactions for them also to advertise at your face during gameplay. I hate this so much. I really think that this is a door that we absolutely cannot let open as gamers. I am so glad that the fan backlash to this was swift and fucking harsh, and I am very, very glad that EA at least seemed to have done the right thing and taken the ads out for now.
Yeah. I agree with a lot of that. I think, to me, the biggest issue here is EA's approach, which they acknowledge themselves. We realise that this should have been communicated with players ahead of time, and that's on us.
What were they going to say, though? What were they going to say? Were they going to say, oh yeah, bring on the ads?
Well,
no.
It should have just been in the review copies. It should have. To me, that's the egregious part of this. It's delaying the introduction of these until after the reviews have happened, until after people have bought and pre-ordered the game and started playing it, and then they suddenly come on. It leaves players without a choice to be made. I think as part of an honest and holistic conversation about games financing, this is part of the mix. Like you said there, it's a door that you don't want to see opened. And I broadly agree with that. As I sort of said to you before, I think that the use of them here is actually completely in keeping with the tone of what the game is. If you see the clip of it, it's exactly what you'd expect from a sports simulation in that one sense. And if it meant that they could not do microtransactions and that they could stop selling as full price games and then keep just literally keeping content that they have made for that game away from you until you pay for it, I think that is and pay to win mechanics, I think those are more egregious monetization strategies because they directly affect your gameplay, what you get to do in the game, and they ask for your money in order to do it. Whereas this is asking for Amazon's money, and it isn't, to my eyes, not massively getting in the way. But the doing it in this way is the fucked up thing for me.
I do completely understand what you're saying there, man. I genuinely do. I don't want to see this door open at all.
That's totally
I really
fair.
don't.
Yeah,
I think that we are opening the door for ads for the boys on loading screens for any game on an Xbox. You know what I mean? And I just don't want that.
Well, there already is that stuff though, right? On the UIs, it says here even in UFC 3 or 4's.
Yeah, which is bad enough.
Logo,
you don't want it in gameplay.
Nah, I think that is worse than having it in the replay moments though, because again, it's there for a split second.
Also, it's worth pointing out as well that this is not instead of microtransactions.
Yeah.
This is not instead of pay-to-win mechanics. This is not instead of gated content. This is as well as.
Yeah. And that also
EA
is bullshit.
have made nearly $3 billion on microtransactions alone, not even including the amount of money that you spent on the game. Yeah, this is bullshit, and I will not have it. I will not have it, Lewis. I will not have it. Alright, news item number 4. Marvel's The Avengers has come out this week, Lewis. And after a lot of concern, after a lukewarm beta, I think we will say, the critical response to the game has been that it's good. It's good. It's not great, but it's good. It's not a total dumpster fire, which I think a lot of people were quite concerned that it was going to be. It's currently sitting at a 70 on Metacritic for the PlayStation 4, which is arguably not that good. But when you actually read the reviews themselves, it really seems that the story itself and the characters are good and they've been shown love. Kamala Khan as well, Miss Marvel, seems to really have garnered a lot of positivity towards the games, just her alone and her depiction in the game. And I like that. I mean, that's great. And that you're paying service to the fans in like a good way there with a lot of the customization options and all this from the back catalogue of the deep history of many of these characters. And all that stuff is fantastic. However, there almost seems to be, and I've read this elsewhere, and there's a good gamesindustry.biz article on this as well about the critical response to the Avengers game, which we will link in the show notes as always over on PlayersToo.com. However, there seems to be almost two games happening here. There is the game that Crystal Dynamics wanted to make. There's the Avengers game that they wanted to make and the story that they wanted to tell with the Avengers characters, and then there is the games as service game that Square Enix want to monetize. And it seems as though the second part of that is massively why people have complaints with this game. Which, I mean, you kind of snort at as if it's obvious, and to a certain extent I suppose it probably is, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way, and we know that it doesn't have to be that way. But the complaints are that it's grindy, that it's repetitive, that because it's a games as service, it launched and it was buggy and it was unpolished. And I've read as well other reviews that say that they've compromised on things like combat mechanics and enemy diversity and things like that because they wanted a games as service, and they wanted this to be like Marvel's Avengers Destiny. And it's not that. Do you know what I mean? It's not that at all. And it's a shame because that seems to have really got in the way of what was Crystal Dynamics trying to give a lot of love to these characters and giving a lot of love to these characters, but is unfortunately overshadowed by having to grind. I mean, when you're Iron Man, what do you want to be doing? Smashing boxes to get upgrades? Like, absolutely not. You want to be kicking bad guys in the face. Like, that's not conducive to a good superhero game, in my opinion.
No, you're totally right about that. And some of the ways in which the grind plays out seem to be not very fun, basically. I just think it's in
someone, I read a review as well, I don't know who this was, I'll try and find the article, described that as a game about opening boxes. And I was just like, Jesus Christ, what a horrific comment to make about a superhero game.
Yeah, there's something in modern gaming that touches that generally, but I think that's the thing about this, the idea that there's actually quite a strong, solid game at the base of this, and a narratively strong game and a well-written game. That's really good, and it's a real strong plus point, because also a lot of these reviews, will potentially change their scores over time if the more servicey aspects improve, which we've seen countless times. If they can get those bugs ironed out, and if they can make the loop less grindy, it might actually turn out to be a bit of a success. And I think it's just really interesting for where games are going generally, that this like Destiny model, even within that, we're still seeing this game as a perfect example to go, actually people really want the single player campaign to be good. That's still a thing to get right, and you will sell copies.
I mean, I think Marvel's Spider-Man proved that.
Oh, exactly, the
Arkham games before that, we've known this for a long time about superhero games, But
just to actually make a service Destiny style game, and to the reviews to come out and be like, the non-servicey Destiny style parts of this game are the good bits, so maybe like focus on that.
Focus on that. Do that in future Square Enix. Don't worry about this monetization nonsense. All right, finishing off as we always do with a couple of shout outs. Shout out number 1, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2 remakes have come out this week, Lewis, and they've received wide acclaim. Currently sitting at an 88 on PS4 and an 86 on Xbox. Don't be a slave to that Metacritic, because I don't think those scores matter in the slightest. What matters is that this remake seems to have hit the absolute sweet spot of having been updated to the standard that you expect it to be, while retaining the soul of what you remember the game to be. And that to me is like the marriage that happened with Shadow of the Colossus. And as a massive Shadow of the Colossus fan, when that remake came out, I was over the fucking moon.
Exactly.
So I'm very, very, very happy indeed for fans of Tony Hawk and skating games in general, because there has been a severe drought in that category of gaming for a long, long time. And hopefully this is a case of looking back to move forward. Do you know what I mean? Looking back, seeing what made these games great in the first place. Then Vicarious Visions, who did this remake under Activision, a bit like Crash 4 that we're now getting now. Maybe we get a Tony Hawk 6 that's actually fucking worth a shit, you know? Alright, shout out number 2. Nintendo earlier today, Lewis, only earlier today, announced a new Hyrule Warriors game called Age of Calamity. This is the second Hyrule Warriors game, which is set 100 years before Breath of the Wild, which is very, very cool. Me and Lewis, both big, huge Breath of the Wild fans. This is developed by Koei Tecmo of Dynasty Warriors fame, and for those of you that don't know, this is basically what this game is. This is Zelda Dynasty Warriors. Yep. Large-scale battles, lots of enemies, that sort of thing. Nothing I am overly interested in. I do love Breath of the Wild, though, so seeing the trailer, I mean, it plucks your heartstrings, doesn't it?
That's it for me.
You want to love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not my type of game at all either, but just seeing that world and those characters, I was like, okay, maybe I'll pay attention to this.
And also, as we were talking about as well, it totally fits that world. It totally fits the big battle that happened before Breath of the Wild, and how they can now fill this in with this spin-off game, which is just great. It's like really good use of a spin-off game to fill in that canon, you know. Alright, and shout out number 3. Ubisoft have announced that we will be getting a Ubisoft Forward on September the 10th, which is the day that this podcast comes out, so we will just have missed it, which is very sad. Ubi has confirmed that we will be seeing Watch Dogs Legion, we will be seeing Hyperscape, we will be seeing Rainbow Six Siege, and we will be getting the re-reveal of Immortals Phoenix Rising, which is the game formerly known as Gods and Monsters. That is a way worse name in every single way, because I keep on forgetting what it is, and I never forget Gods and Monsters, Lewis. Phoenix is spelled Fenyx, which I find very upsetting, and they also confirmed on Twitter to IGN that they do not have a colon after Immortals, so it's actually Immortals Phoenix Rising. It's not Immortals Phoenix Rising. It's Immortals Phoenix Rising, which is how I'll be pronouncing it from now on. Also, a recent leak suggested that game could be coming out as early as December, and I thought the game was going to be pushed way into next year. Usually when a game gets its name changed this close to release, that is a bad sign, you would say. But I'm still very much looking forward to playing it. It definitely takes a lot of inspiration from Breath of the Wild. IGN seem to think there is more than that, and maybe a bit more combat focused is what I'm getting. But hey, more games inspired by Breath of the Wild. I'm totally up for it. Totally up for it. And shout out number 4, bit of sad news, Lewis. Kotaku UK will be shut down. Kotaku have made this statement on their website.
For those that don't know, Kotaku US is run by Geo Media, with Future Publishing licensing out the brand and content for the UK site, the one you're reading right now. Unfortunately, Future has decided not to renew the license when it expires on Wednesday 9th September, meaning the end of the current incarnation of Kotaku UK. So this is it for those of us working on the site right now, but not necessarily the end for a localised version of Kotaku. The rights will be reverting back to Geo Media this week, and US-based Kotaku will continue to operate and produce content.
So no explanation has been given for this as yet, but let's face it, it's money, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
And the fact as well, unfortunately for Kotaku UK, as someone who visits Kotaku quite a lot, 9 times out of 10 when I'm looking for Kotaku, I'm looking for the US version of Kotaku,
Yeah.
not the UK version of Kotaku. However, that being said, it is always very sad to hear about a major video game outlet closing down, particularly one that's here in the UK. And obviously we hope all those working in Kotaku UK land on their feet,
Yeah,
you know what I mean, wherever they go. And hopefully still in video games. And with that, Lewis, I think it's time for a beer, and then we'll be back with Topic of the Week. And we are back for Topic of the Week. Topic of the Week this week is our next gen plans, Lewis.
It is indeed, Mark. Yeah, well, basically, as of today, as of Tuesday the 8th of September, we have a much, much clearer picture of what the console launches look like.
Well, one of them.
One of them, yeah. So we should say, as you said earlier, we're recording this before we know any PlayStation details directly. It seems possible that there'll be some sort of announcement of that tomorrow, so you listeners may well be more aware of it than us. But I think we're confident that the PS5 is going to be roughly £500. There might be a bit of give and take on either side of that, depending on which console as well.
We think generally the PlayStation 5 with the disc drive is going to cost slightly more than the Xbox Series X, and we think that the discless drive is either going to be the same price as the Xbox Series X or maybe slightly less, hopefully, and that neither will be anywhere close to this.
Exactly. And so the Xbox Series S announcement has kind of changed everything, or it may have done. And so that's kind of where I wanted to have this conversation with you now. What we know, what we think we know. What are you doing about next gen? It's November 10th or thereabouts, given that we don't quite know when the PS5 is going to launch. But
again, we reckon it's going to be within a week.
Exactly,
Say,
it will be.
The Xbox
I would
launch.
be stunned if it's any later than like November 17th, basically now. So we're there. It's the start of November. What are you buying? What are you doing?
I am, and always have been, in reality, even before we knew anything about either of these consoles, I was going to buy a PlayStation. I've bought a PlayStation my entire life. I've always owned every single PlayStation console since PlayStation consoles have existed. In a lot of ways, gaming for me has been through the journey of the PlayStation, basically. I have never really deviated from the PlayStation, and now more than ever, I definitely want to be on that system, basically because of the games that are going to be there. And yeah, that's definitely where I'm going to end up, and I know that you are exactly the same, so I am not even going to bother asking you.
Well, I mean, that's kind of one of the interesting things. So for me right now, categorically, I'm going to be playing a PS5 as my kind of main console in the next generation.
That will be the first purchase.
Yeah, that's probably important to say as well. It will be the first purchase, but I don't know that I will definitely be buying that at launch.
Oh.
And I say that because, I mean, in all likelihood, the hype is going to overtake me, and the stupid amount of money I'm saving by not having to commute every day might well just mean that it doesn't matter quite so much. But right now, I'm looking at that situation and going, there's nothing, I mean, there's some launch window stuff, whatever window means, that I'm interested in, but there's nothing that I'm like absolutely categorically day one, I am paying £500 because November 18th, I cannot be not playing the next generation. Do you feel like that?
I have 2 words for you, or 2 hyphenated words, and that is Spider-Man.
Yeah. I don't know that I feel right now that is, one, an absolute launch day must play, and 2, is it definitely going to be worth the jump in console? If this is released on PS4, is it going to be worth making that transition?
I mean, is it going to be worth making that transition for that specific game at that specific time? For me, probably yes. But, I mean, arguably no. Like, I mean, that's not why I would be getting it at launch. I mean, I want it at launch because I want a PlayStation 5 as soon as I can possibly get one. And it's a purchase I will be making almost certainly before Christmas anyway. It will not have changed price in that time.
No.
So if I can get one on launch day, why wouldn't I?
I guess just because the library won't necessarily be there. I suppose the question I'm sort of asking in a roundabout way is it worth paying £500 for that box on day one?
No. I mean, it's worth it to me. But if you, dear listener out there, do not think that it is worth it for you on day one, then don't buy it on day one. The marketing and the hype and all this around these consoles is so intense. It is so intense, both sides. But if you feel, do you know what? I can get by on my PS4 or my Xbox fine just now. I've got Games Pass, or you know what? I've got a back catalogue longer than my arm here from the PlayStation Store. Whatever. Like, there's no rush for this. Like, you don't need to rush into buying this. The marketing will tell you that you do.
Absolutely.
But you don't. And if you need a wee bit more time to save up, if you want to wait until after Christmas, a notoriously, brutally expensive time of year for everyone, then just do that. Like, there's no need to be on that console. I would say that there's probably a very comfortable 6 months where you can transition without missing very much at all. Like, I just really believe that. And although on PlayStation specifically, who are very specifically saying that these games will only be available on the PlayStation 5, so far the ones that we've seen, I would be fine waiting 6 months to play.
Yeah.
Maybe with Spider-Man being the exception. But in general, if you feel that way, if you specifically, Lewis, or listener, if you feel that way, then I wouldn't have any problem with anyone waiting a amount of time to get a console. I would think that as you're approaching a year, and as Sony and Microsoft are leaving the sort of last gen behind and really pushing the next gen by this point, and that being the focal point of all their advertising and all their games, it's at that point that you're then maybe starting to lose out, you know?
Yeah.
But certainly not before Christmas. That's certainly not necessary.
No, not at all.
And I would argue easily into the spring.
I just think basically at the point at which there is a game released for the PS5 exclusively and is not available anywhere else, that I am...
Because I was under the impression that Spider-Man Miles Morales was a PlayStation 5 exclusive, and I think that it is. But you seem to be saying that they've not confirmed that.
I may be misremembering that. I feel like when that was announced, there was some confusion about, because there was that whole debate about, is this an expansion on the original game, and there was real mixed messaging on that.
But that was confirmed that, I mean, it's not an expansion.
It's not an expansion,
although it's set in the same world.
Yeah.
But I was under the impression that was a PlayStation 5 exclusive. Yeah. But Ratchet and Clank definitely is.
Ratchet and Clank certainly
and
is.
Horizon Zero Dawn, whenever that comes out, which I reckon will be Q1 next year.
You think as early as that? You see,
maybe, or well, at least Q2. That's the 6 months, because I'm kind of like, when Horizon comes out, that's like the benchmark. We are now kicking things off on this console properly now, and it will be the same subsequently when Xbox have Halo as well. Like, when that comes out, I assume Q1 next year. Hopefully, Christ. Then that'll be, this console generation has started. Here is the big game that you want to be playing on this console right now.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that's the kind of key part to all of that conversation for me, is that right now, looking at it, if Miles Morales and even Ratchet and Clank are the kind of only PS5 exclusives, like hard exclusives, you cannot play this on any other system, on any other generation, I can wait for those. I could quite comfortably wait even a couple of months into 2021, because by the time I buy the console, those will still be the main games to play there.
Yeah.
And I'm totally content, for example, playing something like Cyberpunk, or simultaneously waiting for the PS5 version of that, but just way down the line, you know. But you mentioned there, if you're already on Xbox and you've got Game Pass, are people going to transition? You have said tonight that you are going to buy, or you're very likely to buy, a Series S.
Yes.
When do you see that? How does that fit into your gaming sphere?
That is happening down the line.
Yeah.
That is happening a long way down the line, I would say. I am going to try and get as much use out of my One X as I possibly can. And until that becomes not viable, and until there comes a game on the X or on the new generation of consoles that I can't play on my Xbox One X, which Xbox have promised me is at least a year, but I don't believe them. Mm-hmm. I would then transition, because again, the price point for the S is just so ludicrously cheap. It's ridiculous how cheap that console is.
And do you think if you hadn't just recently bought your One X...
No, I know what you're going to say here. No, I don't think so, because I got a very, 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 very good deal on that One X, and I have no problem paying the amount of money that I did. See, even if I do buy a Series S on launch day, I would just sell that. I would get the vast majority of the money back that I paid for it, and I wouldn't feel as if I was losing out particularly. But it's not about that for me. It's really not about the money for me.
But if you hadn't bought that, if you just remove the fact that you currently own one and you were going into this transition with only your PS4 and your Switch, do you think that you would buy a Series S sooner?
No, I don't. Like, genuinely, I don't. I can definitely see myself owning a Series S down the line at some point, like 100%. And again, it would basically be as a Games Pass machine, because again, assuming that Games Pass continues to be what it is and continues to be the amazing deal that it is, I want involved in that. Mm-hmm. but it's not as pressing as getting my major console for the next 7 years potentially, which will be the PlayStation 5. It just will. It will, and I'm really excited to get that as well. Whereas the Series S, for me, I don't feel this way because I don't have the same connection to Xbox, but that would be very much a utility, because I remember when my PlayStation 4 arrived being like giddy, and when my Xbox One X, a far superior console, arrived a couple of weeks ago, I was like, oh yeah, and it sat in the box for 2 days and I hadn't turned it on in a week.
Yeah.
It's like what it is.
I mean, it's so telling there then that your approach to next gen is informed largely, like your primary concern isn't necessarily power or anything else. It's about exclusives, right? It's about in a lot of ways, the continuation of certain franchises even.
I mean, there's no way in this world that I'm going through the next generation not playing God of War 2, Spider-Man 2, The Last of Us Part 3, Horizon Forbidden West. That's not happening. That's not an option for me. So yeah, I will be buying that console to play those exclusives, to continue their stories, which I am invested in because I played them on this generation.
Yeah. There's something there for me that, again, I'm definitely buying a PS5. I'm almost certainly going to buy that first. But the Series S announcement today has thrown a bit of a cat amongst the pigeons for me, because I'm really enjoying having Game Pass on my laptop. I've had it for a little while now. My laptop's been able to play basically every game that I've wanted to without any issues, so I don't feel any urgent need to change that or do anything about it. But the price point on this is so ludicrous, and the fact that if I were to buy it on day one, on November 10th, my gaming library, because of Game Pass and because of backward compatibility, would be so enormous that I think that there's probably a lot.
But would it be any more enormous than it is now? Because you already have Games Pass.
Well, yeah, I mean, technically it would still be bigger because the
because the console has got a bigger library. Than
but
PC.
That's a fairly minor point. But yeah, but just that simple thing of the box under my TV, on the day that I spend the money on it, will have more games than the PS5 will have.
100%, that is inarguable.
And do you think then that, because I think we've both been approaching next gen so far with the attitude that PS5 is likely to win, quote unquote, whatever that means, but likely to outsell the Series X.
I thought that up until today.
So do you think, based on that, then you're effectively saying that you think that some, or maybe even a majority of people who had been intending to buy one of the two other consoles will have changed their minds today?
No. I think that a lot of parents are going to see that price point and think that that is what my child will be playing, because it will save me potentially 200 quid.
Yeah.
And it's the next gen console and they get to play with all their mates. And that's what I think is going to have happened. I don't think that anyone who was going to buy the Series X or the PlayStation 5 has changed their mind because of the Series S announcement. I'm more thinking about younger gamers and kids, really.
Yeah.
And they are a huge part of the market that we don't really discuss as, quote, hardcore gamers, a phrase which I despise.
Yeah.
But as people who are really tuned into gaming, we don't really discuss those people a lot. But in actual fact, they are probably a bigger part of the gaming market than we are.
Undoubtedly, yeah. And certainly when it comes to this kind of discussion, we can get into the fine grain of it all. But like you say, for a lot of parents in particular, they're just going to see price point. They're going to see it's the same thing as the other thing. And so that will make sense for
I
them.
get Games Pass, and they have a choice of hundreds of games out the box, as you just said, which they will not get on the PlayStation.
Totally, which is a dream come true from the Xbox marketing position, because parents will love that. They just see that, those words, this is a subscription to 100 games. They get Netflix, they understand how that stuff works. So I think that'll definitely shift consoles. I do disagree slightly, though, that I think some people today might, if you are more of an Xbox player, but not an absolute Xbox fanboy, so to speak, that I think some of them might look at this and go, I can get broadly the same experience on the S and I'll get a PS5.
Honestly, I think I agree with you. I think I maybe spoke a bit too rashly there. I think that if you were someone who was on the fence, particularly if you were someone who was a bit worried about dropping 500 quid in a console, and that you've just seen that you can get a console for significantly cheaper amount, you can get Games Pass, you can still play with all your mates on new next-gen hardware, then yeah, I actually do think that probably is very appealing to people who are on the fence. I was more speaking about people who, like us, are like, I am buying a PlayStation 5. Yeah. Like, unless the PlayStation 5 price point is $1,000, I really can't see a world where I'm not buying a PlayStation 5.
No.
And I'm sure that there are people exactly the same on the Xbox side. I was more talking about those people, I was more referring to those people. But people on the fence, I mean, yeah, certainly. I also think that a lot of people who buy a PlayStation 5, like us, will also buy a Series S at some point.
Yeah.
I am not sure that a lot of people who buy a Series X will be buying a PlayStation 5, or certainly not in as many numbers, which I think means that in terms of total hardware sold, by the end of this generation, if we're looking back in 6-7 years, I really would not be shocked at all if Xbox were ahead. With something that literally yesterday, I probably wouldn't have said.
Yeah. I think you're probably right. I think it's a really strong and quite surprising prediction. That just that one thing that box is even just like £100 to £50 cheaper than we thought it was going to be.
Yeah,
makes all the difference.
I've said before that the cheapest console in recent memory has won the console war of that generation. And right now, Xbox have the cheapest console by a fucking mile, and PlayStation have no answer to it, and quite frankly have no interest in answering the call.
Yeah.
So they not only will have the cheapest piece of hardware, they have the cheapest piece of hardware with no competition and not even an interest from your competitors of getting involved at that price point, you know? So they have that kind of cheap end quotes of the market entirely themselves. So if someone literally can't afford to buy a PlayStation, they can get a Series S.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That gamer exists out there in probably quite high numbers, or certainly more numbers than most people are probably willing to admit.
Oh, absolutely. I can see so many people today going, I'm going to buy the Series S now because that's the money I've got just now, and I will keep saving long term.
Yeah,
and
potentially.
I'll get a PS5 when God of War 2 comes
maybe
out.
We're not interested in Horizon. I know that Horizon didn't sell as well as like some of the other ones, but maybe when Spider-Man 2 comes out, maybe when God of War 2 comes out, maybe when The Last of Us Part 3 comes out, then suddenly, hey,
I've got to be in.
Now it's time to buy the console. But at the same time, PlayStation are also talking about bringing a lot of those games to PC. So the whole dynamic is changing, and it's so interesting, and it will be fascinating to find out where this goes. But I'm still buying a PlayStation 5.
On day one. Well, there you go,
On day one, ideally. I'm not committing to that, but ideally, All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will have to leave it there this week. I'd like to remind everyone that you can find PlayersToo on all the social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com. That's PlayerSToo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, it really, really, really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show, and thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. I know I say it every week, twice every week, but it really does help us out. And if you haven't done that for us, if you could take those 5 seconds, you would be an absolute legend to us. I'd like to remind everyone that our play along game for this month is Gone Home. I've not started playing it yet. I know that it's a very short game. If time is a constraint to you, there is no excuse this time around because the game is super short and you can often get it pretty bloody cheap as well. So play along with us. I'm very much looking forward to getting started. And just an announcement about next week's podcast. We will be recording that one out of time. Woo! That'll be a wee bit of a special podcast. We've got quite a good idea going, I think, for next week. But basically, we will both be on holiday. A welcome break from horrible workplace. We will be on holiday. Not travelling internationally, but we will be on holiday. But podcast next week as always, and then we'll be hitting the ground running the week after with news, topic of the week, and all that good stuff. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week. Thanks.